Hey everyone, Brandon here, and in this video what we want to do is we want to talk about how we can apply the concept of completion handlers to actual crates that you might be using with Rewst. One major example is taking advantage of the new employee onboarding workflow and doing something with that data. In an instance where you as an MSP want to inform your client that someone has been successfully onboarded, we want to be able to trigger a new workflow that informs the appropriate audience that a new user has been onboarded. So we want to build an email template, we want to build a new completion handler, and we want to connect it to the new employee onboarding workflow. Let's dive in. Now, I want to start by talking about why this is so important. When you're using crates in Rewst, those workflows are synced, which means if Rewst pushes any updates that are going to optimize the workflow or add any functionality, if you stay synced, you're going to get those benefits. So one way you could technically customize a workflow is you can unsync it and then add things to the workflow. And we don't want to do that. We want the benefits of the synced workflow. So again, the best way to handle this is with what's called a completion handler, as we talked about in the last video. So if you haven't already checked out that video, go ahead and take a look at that and then come back here. What the completion handler will allow us to do is take a workflow and kick it off once the crate is complete. So here's what we need to do. We need to take the results of the new user onboarding workflow. We need to reference data from that workflow, i.e. information about the user, their name, their last name, their email, and then we want to send an email to notify the company that the user has successfully been onboarded. So I'm going to jump into the new employee onboarding workflow and we're going to take a look at some of the data that we can reference. So this is just an example of this workflow that we have on our testing organization. So we can see here, this is a beast of a workflow. So one of the other benefits that you get from not unsyncing this and trying to customize it is you don't need to worry about the details of how this works. You just need to know the inputs, the outputs, and then you can do something with those outputs with your completion handler. So in order to get a good idea of what data I have to work with in the context, we can actually go here, and this is true for any workflow, and check the results for the workflow. So I'm going to click on this here. And if I click into succeeded, it'll show me the successful tasks, the inputs. I'm going to scroll down here to context. One of the ways that I can ensure that I'm getting the right data is I can click on this button here right next to context. What this is going to do is it's going to open the Jinja Live Editor for me with the context of the results, and then I can use Jinja to reference that data to make sure I'm getting the correct information and ensure that my workflow doesn't break. So I'm going to click on this here, and if I open up the context, I will see all of this information. All right, so what data do I want? Ultimately, at the end of this exercise, I want the email template to include the first name, the last name, as well as the email address, so that the company that I'm informing has all the information they need to see who has been properly onboarded. So I can check to make sure I get the right data here. So if I come down here to the Jinja Live Editor, I can do my double curly brackets, and if you press space, it'll open up and close for you. For everything in the context, you can reference any of this data using CTX. So I can type CTX, and I'm going to look for the first name. Now you could scroll through here and find the correct information. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to make use of the variables that I know exist. So I have first name, I'm going to do CTX dot last name, and then lastly, I need the email. So let's do CTX dot email. Now, if I scroll down here and click render, I will see the name and the email address for this particular user. This is exactly what I'm looking for, and now I can use this information. If you want to test out any of this information in the context, it will always be CTX, the variable. If there are parameters within the variable, you'll just say variable.parameter. So for example, if I wanted the user ID, I could say user.id. So now that I have this information, I'm going to go ahead and copy these, and I'm going to come up to automations and templates. So here I can create a new template. I can call this something like onboarding email confirmation. If I want to add descriptions or tags, I can. And in the text, I can make use of my Jinja. But first, I want to go ahead and actually write the email. All right, so I have the company email here, and now I just need to plug in my data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the name, then I'm going to add the email address, and then we'll talk about how to make sure that we're getting the data from the crate. All right, so I've added the name, I've added the email, and I cleaned up some white space. All right, now we want to make sure that this is going to work with a completion handler. So what does that look like? Just like this. By adding completed workflow in front of CTX, this will ensure that this template works with any completion handler that I'm using it with. So next I'm going to add this to the beginning of each of my variables. All right, so this gives me my template to start with. And next we need to actually go and make the completion handler and then connect all of the pieces together. So I'm going to come down and click submit and submit. All right, so now I have my template. Let's move forward. We're going to go to workflows and I'm going to move myself again. Let's click on create for a new workflow. Okay, now this doesn't have to be a very complicated workflow at all. All I need to do is 3 steps. Number 1, I'm going to drop a no up in there to begin the workflow, as is a good practice. Number 2, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I do an organization check to make sure that this is going to the right organization. And number 3, I'm going to use the core send mail action to actually send the email template that we created. So let's get started. To begin, I will add a no op. So for this core no op, I'm going to simply change the name to begin. And I'm going to add my next no op in order to do that organization check. I'm going to change this to org validation. And for this guy, I'm going to do 2 transitions. 1 will be the success based off of the validation, and 2 will be if it fails, i.e. it's not the correct organization. So I can click on the transition here. I'm going to go to custom condition. I'll open up the Jinja editor here. And in this case, I'm just going to build out the template. So we have to use that completed workflow tag again, CTX to make sure we're getting information from the context, and then we're pulling the organization ID from the completed workflow to make sure that it will go to the correct place. If you want to quickly get the ID from an organization that you're working with, you can actually find it right in the URL after organizations. So in this case, let's just pretend that this is the correct ID, and this will make sure that this only runs when a user has been onboarded for this particular organization. As a custom label, I can add something like MSPs Hyrule check. And then I can add another transition here for failure. So I'll go ahead and connect the 2 here. And now the last thing that we want to do for the workflow is add that core send mail. And this will allow us to send the template that we just created. So for this one, I'm going to come over to core. I'm going to find the send mail action. There it is. Drag that to the canvas. And of course, we're going to fill this out. So if I come down here, I can select sender. I'm going to keep no reply at rewst.io. For the recipient, we'll just do something like company@msphyrule.com. For the subject, I'm going to do completed user onboarding. For the title, we're going to do user onboarding complete. And for the message, I should be able to access my template. If I type in onboarding, I will see the onboarding email confirmation. So I can choose this here, and there we go. All we need to do now is connect the dots. Once we have all of this set up, this is our full workflow. It's going to take the information from the new employee onboarding workflow. It's going to send out the email to the correct people, and the organization is checked here to make sure it goes to the correct place. The last thing we need to do is actually turn this workflow into a completion handler. So we can come up here to workflow completion handler. I'm going to click on run this workflow when the workflow that triggers this workflow is completed. We can click add. I'm going to search for the employee user onboarding workflow. So I'm going to click on succeeded for triggers on status. And then if I want to make sure that I can test this out, make sure everything is in order before it's actually running, I can turn off enabled. Otherwise, I can keep this on when I'm ready to go. So I'm going to turn it off for now since this is just for testing purposes, and I'm going to click submit. And when I'm ready to go, I can actually click on enabled, and this will run for me. Every time the new user onboard executes an onboarding and it works, it's going to notify this particular MSP that that onboarding has succeeded. All right, and it's as easy as that. You can take this example and apply it to any crate that you're using. Just make sure that you use that completed workflow tag. If you want to notify someone when something fails, if you want to create a ticket, those are things that you can do with completion handlers. And these are really great ways to get into the platform, get immediate value with crates, and get even more value by adding different actions through completion handlers. Again, and I really want to stress this, you also get the benefits of synced workflows this way. If you keep your crates synced, you continue to get the benefits of any updates that Rewst has while adding functionality that you specifically need for your MSP using completion handlers. So I hope this example was helpful. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions in the CLUCK channel in Discord or by asking your CSM, and we'll see you guys in the next one.